you'd like at some point to pick one up. Publishing Perspectives is the news medium of Frankfurt Book Fair. And so while in the United States we read Publishers Weekly about the trade industry, and in London we read The Bookseller about the trade industry. If you're in the middle of the ocean, you read Publishing Perspectives, because we're the international medium. We try to cover as many countries as we can in terms of what's happening in the industry, and it's a lot of fun. And what I'd like to do this morning is get us started on our day about independent publishing and about being an independent publisher, about being an independent author, by speaking first with Orna Voss, who's with me today. Very good to have you. Thank you. Orna has come across the channel to do this with us today. It's just great to have her. Orna is the founding director of the, let me see if I've got this up on the next slide. Whoop, that's Robert. There we go. Founding director of the Alliance of Independent Authors, which is based in London. We call it Ally. And actually, is it not the case that more than half or just at half of the membership is in the United States?
Yeah. Probably about 46%, I think now. It fluctuates a bit, but yeah.
There we go. So although it's based in London, the organization is really very international and is available to you wherever you're coming from. The point being that it's there for you as a great service and a great resource, and I highly recommend it. What we'll do during the course of the day is talk to several service providers who are the people and the organizations and the companies who enable the various features of self-publishing for our authors today, who make these kind of things possible. You'll hear from some very good people and some very interesting folks, including one fellow, again out of London, who's doing reader analytics. He's able to tell you when people stop reading your chapter, when they begin reading it, how fast they read it. It's fascinating. It's a wonderful resource for authors. So we have some great people talking today. The reason we're starting with Orna from Ally is because she is a great resource for not only how we got to the point we're at now in terms of self-publishing, where this entire movement of independent authors came from, but where we're going and where the pressure points are at this point. The discussion we're having now about independent publishing has to do with the fact that we've kind of turned a corner. We're in a position now in which we have come to what we're calling at another conference in January in New York, the new professional author. There is a kind of 2.0 effect, having gone through several years of sorting out how self-publishing works best, what its dynamics are, where the problems tend to be, where they aren't, what's understood by the rest of the industry about self-publishing, and what isn't, which can often be a lot. We've now reached a point where there is, I think, a greater comprehension of the position of independent publishing in the industry as a whole. And trying to get your head around that is not always easy, but once you've got it, you find it very, very interesting. This is part of a unified industry that's slowly discovering that unity. They thought they were more separate than they were for a while, which is kind of an exciting point to be at, where everybody's realizing, oh my gosh, we're actually in the same business. We're just coming at it from different pathways. So I'd like to start this morning, Orna, if you could help us with just a quick sense. I know a lot of you are probably quite familiar with self-publishing, but to make sure we're all on the same page, could you start and give us an idea of when self-publishing really picked up and started, when we left the vanity publishing period and stepped into actual independent publishing?
Well, I guess it started initially probably with the desktop publishing movement.
Right.
And we had some pioneers then, like Dan Pointer, no longer with us, and some other people. And there were always authors who self-published. I mean, 100 years ago, a lot of the famous names that have lasted, whose work has lasted down through the century, like W.B. Yeats, like James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, a lot of the greats actually self-published their work. So in a way, trade publishing and the way it kind of really took hold of the publishing process and made it something, you had to go through the trade almost to achieve success, was the anomaly. And I think we don't always kind of recognize that enough. But the current sort of where we are now began at the end of the noughties and really picked up in 2010 and 11 in the US and began to spread very rapidly then to other countries from there. So essentially, that was, of course, because of one particular platform, Amazon KDP, which provided 70% commission, not really a royalty, but a commission on sales. And for authors who were used to receiving less than 10%, and by that time, because of changes that had happened in trade publishing in the 1990s, that 10%-ish was being severely discounted by the actual retail models that were emerging as companies conglomerated and got bigger and bigger, and economies of scale, big publishing in a big way. Authors were really losing out. Author incomes were falling rapidly. A lot of authors were being let go. People who had been held for a long time by their trade publisher were being let go. And essentially, it became quite a tough place for most authors. If you were in there and doing well, it was a fabulous place to be. For the middle-list author and for lots of others, it was extremely difficult to get in. So my first trade published book was a novel, and I actually submitted to 54. I got 54 rejections before it was finally picked up by Penguin.
Well done.
I'm so stubborn. I just wasn't giving up.
54 rejections. I love it. And you persevered.
I kept going.
That's great.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of people don't. A lot of people are not as stubborn as I am. And you know, if somebody rejects them once, they're gone. And they could be incredibly brilliant writers. And because the system within publishing houses, it's very difficult. I worked as an agent for a while. You've just got this absolute sea of material coming at you, and you cannot possibly make, really read it all even. So that was where we were, and then suddenly Amazon KDP came along, digital publishing came along, ebooks were born, and that changed everything, because an ebook doesn't need a big production thing behind it. It's a very low cost, low investment thing to write and put out an ebook. And authors at that time, particularly 2010, 2011, 2012, really just by being there and writing a good book that was properly edited with a good design cover, and even in some cases not actually, you did well. You did extremely well just by being there. You didn't actually have to do the publishing functions of marketing and promotion, because readings were going on, hungry, and particularly readings in certain genre were going on, hungry for books. And so once you were there, you did well. And authors started talking to each other and telling each other this was going on, and a movement was born essentially. And we launched the Alliance of Independent Authors at London Book Fair 2012. In the heart of that, really. There was a heady excitement at that time, and we thought, everybody could win the literary lottery if they were a good enough writer, was the kind of sense.
Yeah, that's a wonderful summation of how we got to this point. It really was the introduction of the Kindle in 2007 that began the ecosystem process to make this doable. Before that, of course, it was possible to self-publish, but normally that meant paying a company, we call a vanity publisher, to do all of the work, and you ended up with 3,000 copies in your bedroom with no way to get rid of them. It was a particularly big mess for a lot of folks, and still is. There are people who would like to do it that way and will pay the money to do it, and unfortunately end up with 3,000 books in their bedroom. Don't go that route. Fortunately, and thanks to what started in 2007 and has picked up, as Orna's saying, around 2012, the new movement is terrific, and you actually have distribution, which is what you're going to hear from with Ingram, and you have the capability to produce a beautiful work that actually goes somewhere, gets in front of people. I think one of the things we have to be honest about, though, that characterizes the 2.0 stage that we're coming into now, the new, mature form of self-publishing we have, is what I also call the wall of content. And we're not trying to say, don't do what you want to do. We want you to write books. We want you to be a part of our industry. But we want you to do it with great consciousness about the fact that you're now in an almost flooded market. You're certainly in a saturated market. That's probably a little easier word to handle. And what I mean by that is that not only in books, not only in publishing, but also in television, in film, in music, in gaming in particular. There are so many attractions now pulling our attention one way. I know you feel it too, one way or the other. It's almost hard to find time to do the reading you want to do now, right? Because there's so many other things. Well, that's exactly what your customer's going through. And so one of the things you'll hear us pushing you toward all day is the most professional job you can do. I'm trying to slow everybody down. Often people come into self-publishing and they want to get the book out, get the book out, get the book out. And what we're learning now is that the most successful writers are the ones who don't rush. Take your time. Where's the fire? The great thing about it is that once you launch, you'll have all the time in the world to sell it because in the ebook, the digital format, is available forever. It won't leave the shelf like it used to in a physical store at Barnes & Noble. It was gone after a month, even if it came from a very good publisher. So now what you have is the time you need to find your audience, build your audience, develop your audience. So take the time you need to do the book really well too. Put money into it, put time and energy into it, and you'll have something really worth selling and something that has a chance in a very crowded market. Because unless it's as good as it can be, it won't break through. I think that reflects a lot of what's being talked about at Ally now, right?
Very much so. There are two things when you're starting out that you have to realize. First of all, this is a long-term endeavor. So just because you can put a book out very fast doesn't mean that writing books has suddenly become something, that you do very speedily. It takes time to write a book. It takes a long time to be good enough to write a book that's worth reading, generally speaking. There are exceptions straight out of the block, but generally speaking, learning your craft takes a long time. And then you're going to turn around and want to become a publisher, which is a trade, and there is craft in it also, and there is art in it actually when it's done really well. And that also takes a long time to learn how to do well. So first there's the production of the actual words, which is one skill bag. Then there's the production of a good book, editorially and design-wise. And then there's the publishing functions of marketing and promotion and reaching readers. And where we are now with Publishing 2.0, as Porter and Publishing Perspectives are talking about it, where we are now is that you need that string to your bow as well. So you can no longer just show up on Kindle and expect to do well. You need to understand who your reader is and how you're going to reach them, and that's a fundamental part of publishing. So all of this takes time. There are very different skills that you have to master, but the astonishing thing is, I think, nobody really suspected before the self-publishing revolution that so many authors would even want to do this and enjoy the publishing process, and that so many authors could be actually really good at it. So we have a professional membership for members who have sold more than 50,000 books in the last 2 years. And that is an incredible achievement that any trade publisher would be proud of. And so it is very doable. And the wonderful thing about self-publishing as well, the thing that gets me up in the morning and I absolutely love, is the way in which authors are helping each other to do this. So you can see the flood of content as a bad thing, and that it's something terrible. And a huge amount of that content, remember, is not readable. A huge amount of the books that are published today should not be published at all. But it doesn't matter, because they just fall to the nether regions of Smashwords or Draft to Digital or KTP or whatever. So it's fine, and it might be a step for a writer on the way to a good book. But actually, the fact that we have so much content is really upping our game. Writers are doing really interesting things that they weren't doing 10 years ago. There's a huge experimentation going on with different genres. There's some really interesting kind of literary experiments that no publisher could afford to take a punt on, that authors will take a punt on, and they will at least invest the time, and they are building up enough readers, not huge, they're not the members we have who are selling 1, 2 or 3 million books, not at all, but they are selling enough books for them to feel validated and to put themselves out again and to do something again. So I don't actually see the content, the wall of content, the tsunami of content, and the other rude words that are applied to the content as a problem, actually. I think we're living in an age of creative abundance, and as readers and as writers and as publishers, we need to understand what that means. So if we're applying the old rules to this new scenario, we're not going to do very well. If we're actually thinking about it from a conventional publishing perspective, we're missing the mark. It's really important that we develop the creative skills. So, for example, as a reader, there is so much content. Are you actually reading the books that you really want to read, that you most want to read, or are you just reading what Amazon gives you as your also reads? Are you taking the time and trouble to actually create the reading list that you want, or is that being dictated to you? So creative is the opposite to consumer. In a consumer society, it's all coming at you, you just take it all in. But we have too much great stuff now to do that, so we all have to get more creative about how we take in our content, and we all have to get more creative about how we produce it and reach our readers with it.
And one of the smartest things that Orna's saying right now, you're getting the distinction, by the way, between the way the journalist looks at this, the wall of content, and the writer looks at this, the abundance of creativity, you see. I call it a really big pile of abundance of creativity, but that's all right. I know exactly what Orna's saying, because if you will remember that the best writers are the best readers, then you will actually be training yourself something about marketing as you discover how you find what you want to read. Your reader is going to take the same path through this wall of content, or through this creative abundance, that you're taking to find what you want. Monitor yourself. Watch how you're starting to select things. Some of the algorithmic representations that Amazon will give you are very good. Some of them are way off the mark. You look at these things they're offering you, you think, my God, do they not know what I'm ordering at all? It's very strange. And that's interesting to know, because what you'll be discovering is, well, that's what my reader's going to encounter on the way to me. So make sure you're conscious of how you're reading and how you're finding your material. Because one of the things that we're trying to say to writers today is marketing is not a separate part of the job. So many of our writers come in thinking, I'm going to write, I'm going to publish, and they stop right there. No, they're also going to have to market. And you need to know that up front, and you need to think of it as part of the creative element of your work. If you can start from the very beginning, thinking as you're writing, how will I get this across to readers? How will I find my audience? Who is my audience? Where do they live? What are they doing? What are they thinking? What are they looking at on Amazon? Then you're more ready, and you're bringing it into the creative sphere of the process, instead of seeing it as this end product that you have to do at the last minute about, oh my God, I can't sell it. Self-publishing is much easier than self-selling, unfortunately. Don't feel too bad, though. All of these big houses here, the ones you passed up front, including Penguin Random House, and everybody else, they're having the same problem. It is a huge battle right now to get things across into a market that has so many distractions. So you're not alone, and everybody's creativity counts. Anything you bring to the table is useful in this regard. And right now, I think some of our most creative people in terms of marketing are coming out of the independent side, because you have a freedom to try things and test things that the bigger houses don't have. So one of the things you'll hear us talking about today in terms of marketing and in getting across to your readers is that very idea of you knowing the material with the creative spark that a publisher might never know it by. They would see this as another product, whereas you see it as the work you understand it to be. You know your reader better than most publishers would. This is a huge advantage. And if you can keep that in mind, it won't feel quite as daunting when you start facing the wall of content, right? You won't feel like, oh my God, how do I get this out there? You'll already know. You will know who wants to read this. I'll give you a lovely example. There's a writer in London I like very much, and she's written a literary piece, which is hard to sell in digital. Literary is not doing very well yet. But it has to do with hypnosis and with regression. And what she's understood over time is that one of her greatest audiences is in the hypnosis field. People who are actual practitioners love this book because it's a novel, but it gives them a way to introduce some of their clients to the idea of hypnosis and what it can bring into your life from past experience, regression, things like that. That's wonderful. And that's a surprise to her. I mean, when she was working the piece, she wasn't really as conscious as I think she will be in her next book as to who she might be writing about and to. And this is great. This is the maturation of an artist's understanding.
Absolutely.
Work, right?
And it feeds in, I think, to what I was saying about not bringing the old publishing ideas to the new age, because probably her hypnotists are finding that book because it's a keyword. It's a keyword and it's a category. Now, in a bookstore, that book's going to be novels. It's never going to find its way over to wherever hypnosis
There's
books
no
are.
hypnosis section.
There's no such section, probably maybe in self-help or something, I don't know. But it's never going to find its way there. So novels can now be marketed through keywords, you know, which is not something, the topic, the setting, the time the book is set in. These kinds of things can now sell books. So this is part of what I'm, you know, talking about in terms of thinking about how the book is reaching the reader, and picking back up on what Porter said, how important it is to become a user. So, you know, we have writers who come and say, I want to self-publish, and putting it up on all the platforms, and then you ask them how they read books themselves, and they're still reading print. They don't own a Kindle, but they want to sell on Kindle. At a minimum, you have to understand what it is to read on a device, how differently a book is presented on a device, you know, all those kinds of things. So if you want to do well on a platform, you must become a user of that platform to understand how the reader is going to experience it.
Is there anybody here who hasn't yet read an ebook, who hasn't read in digital? Anybody? No? Everybody's reading a couple. I recommend you do it. I'm with Lorna too. In fact, I find it more immersive than I do paper. Now, maybe that's because I've always watched a lot of television or something. I'm comfortable with screens. But I find it actually is easier for me to get into a book. I like the glow. I like to be able to read it at night in the darkness. To me, these are wonderful little attributes of being able to read electronically. You might enjoy that yourself, but one way or another, Orna's right. You need to get comfortable with the formats you're going to be asking others to come to you in. And because ebooks are your easiest way to produce, that's probably your entry to the market. It is much easier than it once was to be beautifully printed now. And that will be available, and you'll be able to sell in stores. Robin Cutler is going to tell you about that in our next session. But I want you to know that the ebook is actually a wonderful way to read. And if you haven't really gotten into it yet, give it a good chance and get going in that direction. Orna, with the time, good, we're only half an hour into the session. That's great. Would you tell us some about what Ally offers to the other writers now?
Sure. So we have 4 different actually categories of membership. So our associate members are people who are considering self-publishing. So they may already have been trade published, or they may be complete beginners just setting out. But if then our author membership is for people who have published a book and self-published a book. And then our professional membership is for those who have, as I said, sold more than 50,000 in the last 2 years or so. And we also have a partner membership for services like editors, designers, and all the various people that we will need to help you to put together a good book. And
how many, can I interrupt you, how many of the 50,000 selling members do you have?
Say again?
How big a group is that, the professional membership?
The professional membership is small. It's it's less than 10%.
Yeah. Right. So be aware that's a gigantic number, and you shouldn't ask yourself to be that kind of seller very fast. We'd love to see all of you become that level, but 50,000 is a lot of sales.
Yes, no, absolutely.
That's a lot of units.
Absolutely. And I mention it really not to say that, you know, hop in and do it, but just to say it can be done. I think it's inspiring to know that so many authors can do that. And of course, there are loads of people. So essentially what we do, the services that we offer are lots of information and education. So today, this session that I'm doing with Porter is part of our Indie Author Fringe online conference, which is 24 sessions over the next 24 hours, which will talk to people about running. The theme this time is running an indie author business. So we provide what we see as the cutting edge, most essential information all in one place. We have forums where our authors get together and you can bring any self-publishing question that you have and it will be answered for you, and our advisors also answer your self-publishing question directly, because one of the challenges for an organisation like ours is that people do things very differently, and that's the joy of self-publishing and the challenge of self-publishing. And then we do things like contractual advice when our members are offered a trade publishing or a self-publishing contract. We have a list of ratings of the services out there, because there are a lot of people who are now setting up services for authors that are less than desirable. And we also want to highlight those like Ingram and others who are doing a great job. So we have a ratings list for that. We produce guidebooks. We have how to choose a self-publishing service, how authors self-publishing rights. And then we do a lot of advocacy for the self-publishing within the trade publishing business, which is kind of why we're here in Frankfurt and at various other events too.
Exactly. It's largely thanks to what Orna started with Ally that we have the kind of cohesion we see now in the independent movement among the authors. She's talking about the fact that they support each other so well. That is, this organization is the nexus of that network. They actually come to Ally, they become members, and suddenly they're talking to everybody together. And they're learning from each other and sharing the knowledge. This is the center of it, and that's why I think membership in Ally is important for you to consider, and I would certainly urge you to get into the group if you can. Because without it, you're really out there on your own, and you're kind of inventing the wheel at every stage when you may not have to. There are a lot of people in Ally who can say, don't do that. We tried it 436 times and it didn't work a single time. Do it this way. And that's great. You want those shortcuts wherever you can find them, so you're not a complete novice when you're a complete novice, right? So I think that Ally has been a tremendous service to our authors, and as Orna says, it is the advocacy for the entire movement to the industry as well.
Thanks very much. And one other good thing that we can do, because we're a group, we can organise discounts and things from services. So Indie Author Fringe is actually sponsored by Ingram. They're our gold sponsor, and from now until the end of November, they are offering to all Indie Fringe attendees free setup of your print book, your POD book. So that's also great, and take advantage of that. Indie Fringe 2016 is the code.
And that's about a $50 saving, I think, right?
Yeah, it's
$49, is it?
It's a good time if you have perhaps you already have a softback POD, you could set up a hardback and, do a different format, try a different cover. It's a really good discount to take advantage of at this time.
Let's find out about a couple of what you guys are doing right now, because one of the things we want to do is make sure we talk to what you need today. The way the day is structured, you're free to come and go as you like. We'd love it if you'd stay with us, but of course if you need to dash away for something else, come back to us later. We understand. Who's already written a book? How many of you have a book out? Okay. How many of you have it out through a trade house, through a publisher? Yeah? And not sure? Okay, there we go. Some of us aren't, I understand that. How many of you have self-published? Great, good. So we've got several people with some experience. How many of you have got a piece ready? You're pretty well ready to figure out how to move it out. Done the writing. Oh, very good. Wonderful. Several. Good. That's great. That's a good point to be at this discussion at, I think. And if you're still working up to it, that's perfectly good. That's actually very good, because we'd like you to think about the marketing aspects. We'd like you to think about the technical aspects as you do the creative work, and start walking up to it, instead of, as I was saying earlier, leaving it to the last moment to go, oh my God, now I have to sell it, what do I do? This is great if you're with us in the early stages, so there's no wrong time to hear the kind of things we're going to talk about today. Feel free to jump in and ask us things, wave your hands when you need us to slow down and say something again, or explain it. People like Orna and I talk about these things so many times that we can forget that you don't understand something we've just gone past, so make sure you just flag us down if we're going too fast. And I think the point we're at this stage, Orna, is that maybe we need to talk a little bit about the change over from what I call the indie bestsellers. How many of you know the name Hugh Howey? Jacinda Wilder, Holly Ward, who else? Bella Andre,
Lyons.
right? There was a class of self-publishers who have helped us a great deal because they basically put this thing on the map in a way that even the industry stopped and went, whoa, look at these sales. I mean, there was a time when Hugh Howey, who is the author of Wool, a trilogy that is still in consideration for a film, as a matter of fact, he was selling 50,000 copies per week. It was extraordinary how popular that single first book of his trilogy became. A totally self-published exercise. He had started it as just a chapter, as a matter of fact, not even the full initial book. Put it up online, forgot about it, and a few months later, discovered this thing selling to the ceiling. These things don't happen as often as they used to. And I'm telling you that not to make you feel like, oh my gosh, I wish it could happen. Of course we do. But so that you don't feel bad. That was, again, at that uptake period that Orna's talking about, the sort of golden era, when self-publishing came in and everybody heard about it. They were able to move much faster because there was far less competition. And they were going through a new market that had very little in their way. And about 16 of them, 15 or 16 very fine indie bestsellers, all of them still working today. Barbara Freethy is another one who came in with a lot of backlist from a trade career. They were able to really jump and move very quickly at a point that is not going to happen very easily today. We do, however, have very successful writers, some of them making six figures, and they're not known as well because we're past that big gee whiz moment when everybody learns their names and goes, my God, look at this person. But don't feel daunted by that. Just realize that we're past that early stage only because of the timing. You're still just as good in the party. You're just at a different stage of the party, right?
Sure, and one of the reasons why we don't know those author names is because it's become just so much more common. And it's another way in which publishing has changed. Because in the old way, you got your publishing window. So you were published by your publisher and they put you into the shops and a media campaign was run around the launch of your book and you got your, 6 weeks, if you were really lucky, 10 or 12 weeks to score. If your book did well in that time, it was kept on the shelves and on it went. If it didn't, it was next, please. Now we live in a world where the book and the author is always, we at Ally say we're like Bob Dylan, we're on the never-ending tour. So a book is new to a reader the day they find it. An author is new to the reader the day they first hear about them. That author may have 1 million other readers, or they may have only 10 other readers. It doesn't really matter if the book is satisfying the need of the reader. And it's, again, it's really important to realise that self-publishing means promoting all the time. So you don't, a trade-published author kind of goes out there, does the publication circuit, talks to the media, and then goes back home and writes the next book. A self-published author has a little campaign this month, next month, month after, and all planned out to the end of next year. It's just a completely different way of approaching it. And the first one won't work for self-publishing, and self-publishing one becomes impossible if you're trade-published because nobody will actually put you out there that often, and the papers and everything are not set up around that. So we also have self-publishers who have done press media campaigns, got fantastic coverage, double-page spreads in national newspapers, and it has diddly squat effect on their sales. It just doesn't work. It works when the book is available in the bookstore, in print. That sort of PR campaign works. But for digital books, either POD or ebook, you want a digital campaign, you want an online campaign, social media based. So, it really is two different business models, and I think that's what we're seeing more and more.
It is, and one of the things that Orna's just touched on that I'd like to know about you guys too is how many of you would say that you are comfortable with one or another platform in social media? Twitter, Facebook, pretty comfortable? Don't have to be with all of them, just one is really good, as a matter of fact. If you'll focus, that's usually better than trying to hit every platform. How many of you are really not into social media yet? Just not comfortable with it at all? Not too okay. It's okay. It's all right if you feel that way.
It is allowed.
One of these things that we're going to urge you to do is to think of social media as your friend. Find one that you do feel comfortable about. And remember, the one thing that can be a little bit of a danger with writers in particular, writers, because we talk to each other so much in social media, you can forget and try to market to each other. And other writers really are not the audience you need. If you're going to succeed, you've got to get way out beyond your fellow writers. It's fine to have them buy your book, that's great, we want that. But remember, you can't stop there. And I'm afraid a lot of writers get comfortable talking to each other all day on social media and forget they need to talk to the great unwashed they're not seeing yet. That's who you really want to get to. But social media is really the friend of the independent author. And so another thing we'll push you toward today is to make sure you're thinking of how you can develop your presence. That interaction that you're having with readers is probably the thing that the big houses down the aisle here envy the most. From independent authors, they are better, in general, they are better and faster and sharper and more deeply into their audiences in a very, very direct way than a lot of our trade authors were ever instructed to be, were ever taught to be. Now they're getting training. A lot of our houses are doing a good job of helping their authors come along, learn how to reach their readers, find them, talk to them, cultivate that audience. But it's taken a while to get there, and the independent authors were there first.
Yeah, and I think it's to do with the directness of the relationship. There wasn't that layer in between, so the author used to be somebody that we thought of as, off in their ivory tower or in their beach hut or whatever, but isolated away from the world. Whereas with the self-publishing revolution, and when I think of self-publishing, I include social media, because what is social media but the written word? And it's another form of self-publishing. Blogging is self-publishing. So in a sense, you publish your book, which is this great big thing that you've invested a huge amount of your time, thought, energy, intelligence and inspiration and everything else. But then you use these smaller pieces of content, if you want to use that word, or whatever word you want to use, essentially words, the written word, in some shape or form, to help reach the reader. I like to think of it as reaching the reader. If I say to myself, I'm going marketing now, I'll probably go and wash the floor instead. But if I say to myself, I'm off out now to see if I can meet a new reader online, that's fun to me, and that's, I like to do that, one at a time. That direct sort of relationship is very satisfying and rewarding. And, thinking about your social media in that way, as the written word, rather than thinking about it, oh no, there's my creative book over there, but now I have to do this horrible commercial thing called marketing. It's not going to work for creative types to think about it in that way. And if you really hate social media, you're going to have to think of another way to reach your reader. How are you going to reach your reader if you're not going to use this very, this fantastic tool? For those of us who were there before it existed, realize just what an amazing tool it is in terms of getting your book out there. And, I come from a time where you had to rely on a journalist writing about you for anybody to know that you had written a book at all. It's a very inefficient system, whereas this is one you can build yourself over time. And the one thing I would urge all of you to do, no matter what stage you're at, even if you haven't, if your book is still a distant dream, get yourself a website with your authorname.com or .something, and get yourself a mailing list set up on that, a way of capturing the email addresses of people who are interested in what you're doing. So create something small, take a little bit of time away from writing your book to create something small, a reader magnet that will attract the kind of person that you want to read your book. That is the single most important piece of marketing that you will do. Aim to build over time a database of email addresses so that when your book comes out, you can write to these people and say, hey, it's here at last, and here's how you buy it. And, from the smallest success to the largest success, that is the foundation of indie author success. The people who are doing well have big email lists.
That's exactly right. And where Orna's brought us is a good moment before we transfer over to England for a conversation with Robin. What she's describing is branding. And that's a word that we aren't always comfortable with. We tend to think Westinghouse does branding, not us. But in fact, you're about to do branding. If you're going to be an author, you are the brand. That's the interesting part of this. Not the book you just wrote. because you're going to write another book. You don't want to be Westinghouse today and General Electric tomorrow. The brand has to be you. The constant is you. And this is why, for example, if you're just setting up a Twitter account, please get something close to your name. And when you choose your picture, get your picture in there. Don't put the cover of your book. You've never gone to a party and shaken hands with a book. It's not your book that's going to be that's why it's called social, right? You are a person in the social media. Be the person, be yourself. Get whatever name you can from this system that actually is close to yours so people can find you. In your bio, make sure that you put author. Put the name of your book. Put the title. If you've got a publisher, put that. Help people find you so that they understand that your branding is reflecting a working writer. And they can start following you for exactly what you're writing. I can't tell you how many people tend to miss this point. You'll see some really good authors whose picture is of their children or of their vacation house or something ridiculous that means great things to them, but it doesn't help in their career. And the whole aspect of branding, as Orna is saying, is going to lie primarily in your site. Remember that these days, when somebody wants to know something about anything in any marketplace, any field, if you're buying a refrigerator, you go to the site for the manufacturer to learn about it, right? Make sure you have a site. That is your home on the web, that's your home in the world. And that's where everything is going to come. If you blog from your site, they'll come follow you for what you're reading and what you're writing in the blogs. They want to read you. When they get there, they'll be asked, would you like to be on the mailing list? That's solid gold to you. Every time one of them gives you permission to email them, by giving you their email address, you've got a potential customer. So the site sits there 24 hours a day, collecting all of these people's names who are willing to be contacted by you when you're ready with a book. This is why you start very early on with a site. I'd recommend WordPress. I think it's the easiest to use, quickest to set up. It can make you look very, very nice without a whole lot of effort. Make sure that even if you don't have a thing to say right now, get that site set up. Get yourself a home on the web, and eventually you will have material to start customizing and deepening your site so that people coming to it will get more and more info.